William the Conqueror, the man who changed England forever. On a cold October morning in 1066, two armies faced each other on the rolling hills of southern England. One was led by King Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon ruler of England. The other by a man history would remember as William the Conqueror. By nightfall, thousands would lie dead. Harold would fall with an arrow in his eye, and the fate of an entire nation would be sealed. But William's story did not begin on the battlefield of Hastings. His rise was far more improbable. Born the illegitimate son of a duke and a tanner's daughter, he was mocked as a child and dismissed as unworthy. Yet through ruthless determination, strategic brilliance, and sheer willpower, he transformed himself from the bastard of Normandy into one of the most powerful kings in Europe. This is the epic tale of William the Conqueror, the boy who should never have worn a crown, but instead changed the destiny of England forever. William was born around 1028 in Falaise, Normandy, the illegitimate son of Duke Robert Thurse of Normandy and a woman named Herleve, the daughter of a tanner. From the very beginning, his status was a curse. Nobles sneered at him, calling him William the Bastard. His legitimacy was questioned, and in the brutal politics of medieval Europe, being illegitimate was almost a death sentence for any claim to power. Yet fortune favored William in one crucial way. His father, Duke Robert, had no other heirs. When Robert set out on pilgrimage to Jerusalem, he declared William his successor. Robert never returned. He died on the journey in 1035, leaving the young boy, barely 8 years old, as the new Duke of Normandy. The years that followed were brutal. Normandy descended into chaos as rival barons fought for power. Castles burned, and assassins lurked in the shadows. William grew up surrounded by treachery. More than once, loyal protectors smuggled him to safety in the dead of night. These experiences hardened him. By the time he reached adulthood, William was no stranger to betrayal, war, or survival. As William came of age, he asserted control over his duchy with ruthless determination. He fought rebellious nobles and crushed opposition with an iron fist. By his 20s, Normandy had transformed from a fractured land into a strong, disciplined duchy. But William was not just a brute. He was also a shrewd political player. His marriage to Matilda of Flanders, a powerful noblewoman, expanded his influence and secured valuable alliances. Together, they would have 10 children, ensuring a lasting dynasty. William's rise was remarkable. From a boy ridiculed for his birth to one of the most formidable dukes in Europe. Yet, he wanted more, and his eyes turned across the English Channel. The story of William's claim to the English throne begins with his cousin, Edward the Confessor, King of England. Edward, who had spent part of his youth in Normandy, reportedly promised William that he would succeed him. According to Norman chroniclers, Harold Godwinson, England's most powerful noble, also swore an oath to support William's claim. But when Edward died in January 1066, Harold seized the crown for himself. To William, this was treachery of the highest order. He claimed Harold had broken his sacred oath, and he prepared to enforce his right by force of arms. Assembling an invasion force was no small task. William needed ships, soldiers, supplies, and the blessing of the church. He secured papal support, an enormous advantage, framing his campaign as a holy mission. Volunteers from across Europe joined him, eager for land and plunder. By the summer of 1066, William had gathered a fleet of hundreds of ships and thousands of men. Yet fate tested him again. For weeks, unfavorable winds kept his army stranded in Normandy. Meanwhile, Harold Godwinson faced his own trials. In September, Harold rushed north to fight a Viking invasion led by Harald Hardrada of Norway. At the Battle of Stamford Bridge, Harold achieved a stunning victory, but his army was exhausted and battered. And just as the English celebrated, William's fleet finally set sail. The morning of October 14th, 1066, dawned cold and uncertain. A thin mist rolled across the Sussex countryside, clinging to the earth as if reluctant to let go of what was about to unfold. On one side of the field stood Harold Godwinson, King of England, his weary army hardened by weeks of desperate marching. Only days earlier, they had fought a brutal battle at Stamford Bridge in the north, crushing the Norwegian invader Harold Hardrada. They had barely rested when word came that another storm was brewing in the south. William of Normandy had landed with his fleet, bringing knights, cavalry, and the iron will to seize the English crown. Harold's men were tired but resolute. They formed a shield wall at the top of Senlac Hill, their axes and spears glinting in the pale sunlight. Shoulder to shoulder, the Anglo-Saxon huscarls and herdsmen stood as an unbreakable human wall, shields locked, determined to hold their ground. On the other side of the field, William surveyed the English line with a calculating gaze. His army was diverse: Norman knights, Breton horsemen, Flemish allies, and mercenaries bound by promise of plunder. He relied not only on their strength, but on his mastery of strategy. William knew that brute force alone would not win the day. He needed to outthink his enemy, to break the iron discipline of the English shield wall. The battle began with the thunder of drums and the blare of horns. Norman archers loosed a deadly hail of arrows, blackening the sky. The shafts rained down, thudding into wooden shields, clattering harmlessly off helmets, or sinking into exposed flesh. Yet the English line held. The men of Harold stood unyielding, their formation absorbing the first storm. Then came the infantry charge. Norman foot soldiers surged uphill, shouting battle cries, their swords and spears flashing. They met the shield wall with a clash of steel and bone. The sound was deafening, iron against iron, wood splintering, men screaming in rage and pain. Still, the English did not break. It was time for William to unleash his most feared weapon, the Norman cavalry. Mounted knights, armored and unstoppable, spurred their war horses into the fray. The earth trembled beneath the thunder of hooves as they charged up the hill. Lances leveled, they smashed into the English shield wall with terrifying force. But again, Harold's men stood firm. Spears thrust upward, horses reared and toppled, knights were dragged down and cut apart by axes. The hill became a killing ground. For hours the battle raged, a brutal stalemate. Blood soaked the grass, bodies piled high, yet neither side gave way. Then fate intervened. A rumor spread that William had been slain. Panic rippled through the Norman ranks. Soldiers faltered, some began to retreat. But William, alive and furious, tore off his helmet and rode among his men, shouting, "Look at me! I live! I fight!" His defiance reignited their courage. Seizing the moment, William changed tactics. He ordered his cavalry to feign retreat. Pretending to flee in terror, the horsemen galloped downhill. The English, believing victory was at hand, broke ranks and pursued. That was the mistake William had been waiting for. In an instant, the cavalry wheeled around and charged back, cutting down the scattered English. The once solid shield wall began to crumble. As the day dragged on, exhaustion weighed on Harold's army. William pressed the attack relentlessly, wave after wave of arrows, infantry, and cavalry grinding down the defenders. Then came the fatal moment that sealed England's fate. Harold, standing tall beneath his banner, was struck. Legend says by an arrow to the eye, though some claim he fell beneath Norman swords. Whatever the truth, the king was slain, and with him, the spirit of his army. The English line collapsed. The Normans surged forward, slaughtering the remnants. By nightfall, the field of Hastings was a charnel ground littered with the dead. The crown of England lay in the blood-soaked mud, waiting for William to claim it. The Battle of Hastings was more than a clash of armies. It was a turning point in history. The Anglo-Saxon Age ended that day, and the Norman conquest began. William's victory was only the beginning. Conquest was one thing, ruling was another. England was a land of proud traditions and fierce resistance. Rebellions erupted across the country, and William responded with calculated brutality. One of the most infamous episodes was the harrying of the North in 1069 to 1070, when William's forces laid waste to northern England, burning villages, slaughtering livestock, and leaving entire regions devastated. It was a message. Resistance would be crushed without mercy. Yet William was not merely a destroyer. He reshaped England with enduring reforms. He introduced Norman feudalism, redistributed land to his loyal followers, and commissioned the Domesday Book, a vast survey of his new kingdom's wealth and resources. His rule permanently altered the English language, culture, and aristocracy. French became the language of the elite, blending with Anglo-Saxon speech to form the foundations of modern English. Castles rose across the land, symbols of Norman dominance. William the Conqueror ruled until his death in 1087. His final years were marked by conflict with his own sons and renewed wars in Normandy. When he died, his body was laid to rest in Caen. Though even in death, controversy followed. His funeral was so chaotic that his corpse reportedly burst due to improper preparation, but William's legacy was undeniable. He had transformed England forever. The Norman conquest reshaped the monarchy, the nobility, the language, and the culture of the nation. Nearly a millennium later, the descendants of William still sit on the throne of England. From the bastard child mocked in his youth to one of the most influential kings in history, William's journey remains one of the greatest stories of ambition, conquest, and destiny. William's story is a reminder that greatness can emerge from the unlikeliest beginnings. Against every odd, he rose from illegitimacy and ridicule to forge an empire. His victory at Hastings was not just the triumph of an army, but the triumph of resilience, strategy, and unshakable will. William the Conqueror was more than a king. He was a force of history, and the England we know today. Its monarchy, its culture, its very language bears the indelible mark of his conquest. If you enjoyed this story about William the Conqueror and would like to discover more epic tales from history, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring even more fascinating stories to life, and we'd love to hear what you think and which figures from the past you'd like us to explore next.